everyone. Thank you all for joining tonight. It's my pleasure to welcome you to Northern Kentucky History Hour. I'm your host for tonight, Heather Cook, joining you from my dorm in Worcester, Ohio. Also joining me from the Behringer-Crawford Museum is our presenter for this evening, Bob Webster. Thank you for being here, Bob.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to speak to your groups.
So Northern Kentucky History Hour is a project of Behringer-Crawford Museum, Northern Kentucky's history museum, that would not be possible without support. We'd like to thank all of our sponsors, including the City of Covington, Kenton County Fiscal Court, ArtsWave, Kentucky Arts Council, the Northern Kentucky Sports Hall of Fame, the Carol Ann and Ralph B. Hale Jr. Foundation, and our members. And if you're not yet a member of the museum, please consider joining for access to discounts and exclusive programming. You can learn more and join at bcmuseum.org. We would love to hear from our viewers tonight, so if you have a question or comment to share, please type it in the chat or the Q&A feature, and I will be sure to get to those at the end of the presentation. So let's meet tonight's speaker. Robert Webster is a Northern Kentucky native and has written numerous articles and books on the region's history, including A Brief History of Northern Kentucky and the Beverly Hills Supper Club, The Untold Story Behind Kentucky's Worst Tragedy. He is a three-time winner of the Kentucky Historical Society's Outstanding Publication Award and is a frequent speaker for civic and community groups throughout the region. He is the past president of the Kenton County Historical Society, a career agent with Kentucky Farm Bureau Insurance and Independence, and a shift manager at Turfway Park Racing and Gaming. But before we get started, there is a quiz question tonight. The first respondent to enter a correct answer in the chat on Zoom or Facebook Live wins a Northern Kentucky History Hour prize, and most importantly, bragging rights. So tonight's question is, what was the name of the horse that raced at Old Latonia, who was the only horse to ever beat the famous Man o' War? So please leave those answers in the chat, and Bob, if you are ready, we can go ahead and get started.
Absolutely. We've got a lot to cover since it's a 140-year history, so I'm going to get right into it. And I think this presentation is actually about an hour and a half long, so I'm going to have to condense some of these slides down a little bit, so bear with me. But again, it's a pleasure being here, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to everyone. Most people know that the new Turfway Park opened this September of 2022 after Churchill Downs purchased Old Turfway and after more than $200 million in renovations. But where did it all start? Well, most people that are tuning in are familiar with the old Latonia Racetrack, but we're going to go back just a little bit further than that. When Kentucky joined the Union in 1792, horse racing had already become quite popular in the New World. Informal dares amongst townspeople were commonplace, and that's where really the quarter horse became popular. These races took place in front of courthouses and local taverns. In fact, Cincinnati's Race Street was so named because of the many races up and down that thoroughfare. In his Racing in America, John Hervey described the quarter-mile contest as one of the most picturesque and vivid aspects of turf sport ever seen in this or any other country. Another writer wrote that it was a rough and tumbled affair with jockeys trying to foul their opponents and unseat their rivals at every turn. Arabian blood arrived in the U.S. in 1732, which brought the first thoroughbreds of English descent here in 1797. That horse was Blaze. Today, all true thoroughbreds must have unbroken bloodlines from these three original stallions. In Kentucky, Colonel William Whitley organized a series of rules and regulations for those impromptu dares that were taking place. After serving in the American Revolution and despising the British, he vowed to make two changes to differentiate American racing from how things were done in England. First, racing would be done counterclockwise rather than clockwise, as was the case in England. And second, the races would take place on dirt rather than grass. That is still the common American way to race thoroughbreds. Whitley's also credited with building the first oval racetrack in 1789. The Association track opened in Lexington in 1828, was the first to utilize Whitley's rules and regulations. But what became Churchill Downs in Louisville didn't open until 1875, quite a few years later. In Northern Kentucky, with the tremendous success of the tracks in Louisville and Lexington, a group of Northern Kentucky politicians and businessmen decided that the upper counties of the state needed a similar facility. And I won't read these names off, but most importantly was possibly John Taylor, the son of Colonel James Taylor and grandson of the prominent pioneer landowner and founder of Newport, General James Taylor. Regarding location, a large tract of land just south of Covington was chosen. It was cheaper, far from the city, extremely flat, and it just happened to be owned in part by the Taylor family. As for a name for the new racetrack, a term was borrowed from a very popular nearby mineral water spa, so Latonia Racecourse was born. Here's a map that doesn't clearly show where the track was, but if you're familiar with Big Lots and McDonald's and the American Legion Hall, it would be in that area of what is now Latonia. Some great postcards still exist from the old Latonia Racetrack. We call it the Old Latonia, but since there will be a Latonia coming up that you'll read about. But Latonia opened on June 9th, 1883, with a massive wooden grandstand and clubhouse, a mile-long dirt oval track, landscaped infield decorated with flowers and shrubs. On opening day at Latonia, a cloudy Saturday dampened by persistent rain, a crowd estimated at over 8,000 assembled. The first race was scheduled at 3 p.m., and during the 2 or 3 occasions that the sun appeared before the inaugural race, the fans responded with heavy cheers. Surreys, omnibuses, day carriages, hacks, and road carts arrived and were positioned in long queues so that the fun seekers could both socialize and, yes, if they wished, view the races. Women were clad in fashionable clothing with wasp waists and bustles. At the same time, the men sporting walrus mustaches and Santa Claus whiskers, and derbies, skin-tight trousers, and flowing ties. If not seated in their conveyances or picnicking nearby, the women sat in a special grandstand pavilion while the men roamed more freely. Back then, women were seated separately from the men. The first race was a 1-mile event with 16 horses. Markland, a brown colt owned by Colonel Jack Chin and G.W. Morgan of Harrodsburg, Kentucky, became the first horse to ever win at Latonia. The owners received a whopping $300. The feature race was a 1.5-mile Hindu Stakes, named for the 1881 Kentucky Derby winner. The field included the top 3 finishers of the 1883 Kentucky Derby, which was run just a few weeks earlier. The fact that 3 top-quality thoroughbreds were racing on Latonia's opening day was proof enough that the track would be a huge success. The victory went to Leonidas, the famed black jockey Isaac Murphy was aboard. Black jockeys were prevalent at the southern and midwestern racecourses in the post-Civil War era, and Latonia was no exception. Not surprisingly, the first 3 Kentucky Derby winners were trained by black men. There's a nice picture of the 1883 Derby winner, Leonidas. The heyday at Latonia was something that most people in this area are not familiar with. Here's a couple of more pictures on the left there, crossing the finishing line at Latonia, and on the right, a massive crowd gathering on the apron to watch the exciting races. Employees at the Old Latonia there in the top left corner, and 2 more shots of famous races. By 1883, Latonia was strong enough and had its own identity that the name of its most prestigious race was changed from the Hindu Stakes to the Latonia Derby. Many changes had taken place in appearance as well. The original grandstands had been destroyed in a windstorm, replaced by an iron and stone structure described in the Kentucky Post as a model not exceeded by any other track on the North American continent. The track had also been refitted with concrete sidewalks, improved drainage, modern bar, restaurant, telegraph offices, luxurious private suites for the use of the club members. The original 200 stables had been increased to 700, with even more planned. Most impressive, by the late 1880s, the Latonia Derby was the biggest horse race in the entire country. By the early 1900s, racehorse owners were continually transporting their prized thoroughbreds between Kentucky's most popular tracks. To assist racing fans and horsemen alike, the state renamed portion of existing highways to mark the best route. Thus became the 3L Highway, standing for Louisville, Lexington, and Latonia. Most successful years for Old Latonia were from late 1890s to around 1929. The Latonia Derby continued to be the premier event in the nation. Only the highest caliber horses ran, including the following top tiers. And again, I won't read these off, but Joe Cotton, Pink Star, Silver Cloud, Wintergreen. These are some of the world famous horses that race there. $2 across the board, it says. The most important contribution from the original Latonia racecourse to American thoroughbred racing likely came in 1911. Before that time, wagering involved bets between individuals or through a bookmaker. Churchill Downs installed pari-mutuel machines and Latonia followed suit, but Latonia became the first track to drop the minimum $5 bet to just $2. Today, the $2 bet remains the standard across the country. There's a nice aerial view of the original Latonia Racetrack. The main thoroughfare in the foreground is Winston Avenue. So that gives you some idea of where you're looking. You're basically looking to the southwest. And the grandstands and main entrance would have been on the railroad side, not the Winston Avenue side. And some more color postcards. On the left there is one of the original programs from the Latonia Jockey Club. And then the one in the middle is from 1929, and a couple more color postcards of the Old Latonia Racetrack. Probably the most common picture that is seen if you go to the library's website and other websites. This is the clubhouse on the left and the grandstands at Old Latonia. Matt J. Wynn was the man known to have saved the Kentucky Derby, but as far as we're concerned, he's the man that destroyed the Latonia racecourse. Born in Louisville, Kentucky, he was a businessman and racing enthusiast. He was a tailor by trade, and at one time he was asked by one of his clients, William Applegate, to come on board at Churchill Downs. Applegate had owned over 80% of the new Louisville Jockey Club at that time. Wynn's plans from day one was to turn the Kentucky Derby into the top race in the United States. He ended up purchasing Churchill Downs in 1902. Latonia continued its incredible success, however. In 1911, the $225,000 distributed led the country, leaving Churchill far behind at $176,000. And in 1912, Latonia gained everlasting mortality when the track paid out the highest mutual ever. The 941-1 long shot wishing ring rewarded 4 bettors over $1,800 each on their $2 bets. And other events were spotlighted at the beautiful track as well. Air shows and automobile racing. A lot of people are not familiar with the fact that those took place at Latonia as well. 1912, the Louisville Racing Association was formed. Matt J. Wynn becomes involved. The group purchased Latonia Racetrack. Wynn sent Jack Hackmeister with instructions, do not ever compete with Churchill Downs in the Kentucky Derby, and John did just that. But Latonia's success continued for another 15 years. 1913, Latonia remained tops in purses. It joined Belmont Park, Aqueduct, Saratoga, Pimlico, and Churchill to be ranked in the top 5 racetracks in the entire country. But Wynn hit full steam with plans to make his Kentucky Derby the top race, holding back additional management personnel and improvement funds from his newly acquired Latonia racecourse. Unfortunately, a couple of tragedies to mention. In April of 1914, fire struck Barn 18, killing 8 thoroughbreds, including the 1909 Kentucky Derby winner, Wintergreen. October 5th of 1915, in the first race on the card, Beachcomber broke down, throwing 21-year-old jockey Carl Gantz to the ground. He was rushed to a nearby hospital with severe skull fracture, but he never regained consciousness. More legendary thoroughbreds raced there: Exterminator, Black Gold, Sarazan, Clyde Van Dusen, Epinard. Upset, the only horse to ever beat Man of War, raced at Old Latonia. And the 1924 championship race matched Kentucky Derby winner Zev with Carl Wiedemann's in memoriam. That's a chapter in itself on the disputed rematch that was held at Wynn's track in Louisville. At the onset of the Great Depression, gimmicks and giveaways were used to keep the track going. They didn't work. linked with Matt Wynn's total neglect of his sister property, the racetrack was dying. By the late 1930s, the once thriving track was mainly used for auto races and political rallies. On June 8, 1939, President Franklin Roosevelt made a scheduled stop to a group of over 25,000 people. He opened his speech by saying, quote, "My friends of Kentucky, I am glad to come to this beautiful spot today. I know all about Latonia." And there was a tremendous amount of cheers after that. The last thoroughbred race at Latonia was on July 29, 1939. A packed house watched Catalonia become the final winner at the once famous track. The last event held was the Kenton County Centennial during the summer of 1940. The property was sold to the Ohio Oil Company for $263,000. Today, all that remains is an aging shopping plaza along with an official Kentucky Historical Highway marker commemorating the incredible life of the Latonia Racetrack. And a few more pictures before we move on. There's the women's section on the right. Beautiful place. So horse racing leaves Northern Kentucky. Horse racing fans still wanted to play the ponies, of course. Many chose to make the drive to Keeneland, Churchill Downs, or to nearby River Downs, just outside of Cincinnati. Most took to local bookmakers who plied their trade in nearly every tavern in Covington and Newport. Fancier gambling clubs such as the Flamingo, Lookout House, Beverly Hills Country Club also had such operations. Horse racing returns, and the track that never was. Well, the birth of New Latonia and Turfway Park actually began in the 1950s. The Kentucky Raceway was built just west of Florence, specializing in harness-style racing. However, it only operated for a few years. In 1956, it was announced that a group of men in rural Kent County had purchased land in Nicholson at the intersection of Kentucky 16 and 17 for the new Latonia Racetrack. It never materialized, however. In July 1956, Matt Wynn Williamson, grandson to the late Matt J. Wynn, organized a group of Northern Kentucky investors. The idea was born at a meeting at Ben Castleman's White Horse Tavern in Park Hills. 1 week later, the Kentucky Jockey Club purchased 473 acres on Price Pike in Boone County for $1,000 per acre. The majority of the land was held at the farm of Walter Scott. There's a Caroline Williams sketch of the Walter Scott house there at the bottom right. And groundbreaking. An aerial view of where the Latonia Racetrack was built, the new Latonia Racetrack. You see the future Houston Road hadn't even been built yet. The site of the hospital, the interstate was just being dug through, but that's a nice aerial shot of before the development there. Williamson announced that the clubhouse and grandstands would be housed in one structure. Stables would accommodate up to 1,000 thoroughbreds, automobile parking for as many as 1,200 patrons, grandstand seating for up to 7,000 guests. This was a huge facility. It all sounded good, but none of it happened on schedule. Financing was a problem from the very start. Plans were made for an August 1957 grand opening that never happened. Contractors walked out over slow pay. If that were not bad enough, Wayne Carlisle uncovered 2 previous burials while bulldozing for the track, so that held things up for several weeks. Awarded dates by the Racing Commission were reversed. The new jockey club was broke and needed additional investors. John B. Kelly Sr., an East Coast millionaire and father to Princess Grace of Monaco, came to the rescue. Opening day at New Latonia was August 27th, 1959. To accommodate fans, maps showing how to get to the remote facility were printed in local newspapers. The Green Line Bus Company ran special service from downtown Covington, and even the Anderson Ferry made special arrangements. The inaugural meet began at 2 p.m. under clear and sunny skies and the temperatures in the 80s. Traffic along Donaldson Highway and Price Pike, the 2 main arteries into the park, was a mess. A crowd totaling 11,117 packed the grandstands with Governor A.B. Happy Chandler in a front row seat. Admission was $1, $3 for the clubhouse level. Parking was 50 cents or $1 for valet. And the opening card featured 9 races. The new Latonia featured a 5-level, self-contained building anchored by a grandstand with a clubhouse. The structure provided 2 floors for grandstand seating, a mezzanine, the clubhouse level, and a private room called the Latonia Club. The clubhouse was of modern design and had an area for terrace dining. Each level had a promenade overlooking the paddock and walking ring, and the maximum capacity was said to be 20,000. And here's some great shots of the early days at New Latonia. One of the programs on the left-hand side, one of the $2 tickets, that the bottom thing was a magnet there advertising, but you can see the grandstands absolutely full of spectators. And another aerial view showing the lake, which was supposed to be carved out as the shape of Kentucky, but when they decided that the fans would be facing the sun, they moved the grandstands to the other side, so all you had was an upside down view of the Kentucky lake. The New Latonia opened with an overall unfinished look. The plan called for a glass enclosed grandstand, but that would not happen for several years. Stalls were severely inadequate. 1,300 applications for space were received. Only 600 were available. Only one coat of battleship gray paint was applied to the grandstands. It would be several years before a second coat was applied. And persistent traffic problems on the narrow 2-lane roads leading to the facility caused headaches for years. Financial troubles continued. In November 1959, 55 liens totaling $1.7 million were filed in local courts. In the end, the Latonia Operating Company was formed. Meanwhile, the city of Florence and Boone County began a never-ending growth period. What once was nothing more than green pastures became congested roadways, expanding from 2-lane curvy paths through the countryside to 4- and 6-lane divided thoroughfares. This all played in Latonia's favor. The New Latonia eventually showed a profit in 1962. Pat Kelly of Louisville was named Director of Operations. He worked diligently on Latonia's growth. Winter racing debuted in 1964, but was a total failure. The open air grandstands meant that the fans froze. Glass was finally installed on the structure, completely enclosing the facility. And in December 1966, the Cincinnati Enquirer announced that the track was for sale. There's the glass enclosed grandstands you can see in the background. In February 67, Latonia was sold to Lou Jacobs, owner of the local professional basketball team, the Cincinnati Royals. Jacobs, it was later discovered, also headed Emprise Corporation out of Buffalo, New York, and that sports team was just one affiliate of a major conglomerate. Business from 1969 to 1970 was absolutely incredible. And here's some harness racing. You can see the different gates that Latonia sported, and some of the Barry B. Good, one of the prize thoroughbreds. The Mafia and the Spiral Stakes debut. Well, rumors of a Mafia connection circulated for years. Mafia-run gambling casinos had operated in Newport, Covington, and other parts of the tri-state since the early 1930s, but there never seemed to be any proof of a connection with the Latonia Racetrack until the early 1970s, after Lou Jacobs purchased the property. And I won't get into all the details there, but there was a Mafia connection with the owners at that point in time. No more. But when Williamson later defaulted on loans, Emprise took full control of the Latonia Racetrack. The Battaglia years. In 1971, John Battaglia stepped in as the new general manager. He had a long history of grooming horses and handicapping. Under new management, Latonia ended the spring meet in 1971 with its best figures ever, averaging 5,600 in daily attendance and grossing more than $20 million in handle, distributing over $1 million in purses during the 40-day season. From 71 to 75, attendance increased in 4 of those 5 years. Battaglia supervised backside and grandstand improvements, purse increases, and more. They also began the yearly Bean Bash to benefit local charities. There's a picture there with U.S. Senator Wendell Ford speaking at one of the events. But we want to talk about the Spiral Stakes, what truly put Latonia and then later Turfway on the map. John Battaglia's dream was to add a single stakes race to the Latonia card that would put the somewhat insignificant track on the map worldwide. He announced his plans to the staff in 1971. The race would target 3-year-olds preparing for the Kentucky Derby. It would be the first of 2 prep races for the Derby, along with Keeneland's Bluegrass Stakes. Hardly an overnight sensation, however, the first event carded at a modest $10,000. The event grew slowly, but would eventually become one of the premier sporting events in the entire region. By 1974, the race was recognized nationally as a true prep race for the Derby and was bringing in higher caliber talent, both with the thoroughbreds and the riders. However, the most significant memory in 1974 was not the Spiral Stakes. For fans in attendance in March of that year, those who remained for the 7th race on the card, it was witnessing an extremely rare event. Some of you probably know about a dead heat, but this particular race had a triple dead heat. 3 horses that crossed the finish line. This is just a few feet before the finish line, but 3 horses that crossed exactly at the same time for a triple dead heat. Significant Spiral Stakes winners, you can read down that list. Inca Roma, Bob's Dusty, Mythical Runner were huge. Significant changes at Latonia in 77. The Jockey Club, now under the rule of Emprise, began bringing in their own handpicked men. John Battaglia was removed from the top spot. He moved over to River Downs. He was never able to see how his idea of the Spiral Stakes really took off. Unfortunately, he died of a heart attack not long after leaving Latonia. By 1981, the Spiral Stakes had grown to a $50,000 race. Greater attention was being given to it on a national scale. Local sports writers even called it the first leg of the Kentucky Triple Crown. The event grew to a full-scale community festival as well. Golf tournament, beauty pageant, 5-kilometer run, fish fry. I mean, it was truly a week-long event. Emprise finally realized the importance of the event. They instructed Vance to find a corporate sponsor. Eventually signed an agreement with Jim Beam Distillers. And to try to quench rumors of a mafia connection, they changed their name to Delaware North. For the first few Jim Beam Spiral Stakes, Delaware North went all out. Celebrity appearances, concerts, and more. Here's a few pictures here with singer Lee Greenwood. The top picture there is Reggie Williams of the Cincinnati Bengals with comedian Jerry Lewis. Funny man Henry Youngman is there, actor comedian Jimmy Walker. So this was a huge event, the party, if you will, before the race. 1982, there were 2 barn areas, one where the present backside exists and one where Target is located. Latonia became the first track in America to offer inter-track simulcast wagering when it broadcast the 1982 Marlboro Cup from Belmont Park. The economy had tanked, however. Attendance had leveled out, but the handle had dropped over the past 2 years, except for Spiral Stakes Day. That was still a huge, huge event. One highlight from the era was Marfa. Marfa was the 1983 Jim Beam Spiral Stakes winner. He won the Santa Anita Derby, but he was disqualified in the Bluegrass Stakes. He finished 5th in the Kentucky Derby. So Marfa was the first Spiral Stakes winner to qualify for the Kentucky Derby. In 1985, one of the most significant improvements took place at Latonia. It became the first track in America to install a synthetic surface called Polytrack, much safer for the horses as well as their riders. After the Spiral Stakes, however, Emprise Delaware North won it out. It seemed the facility was spiraling down and Old Latonia needed a miracle. In comes Jerry Carroll. Just 2 days after Latonia closed its races in 1986, the facility was sold. He was had a big real estate career in Nashville and saw the potential of the vacant farmland along I-75 near Florence, as well as the track itself. With partner Jim Thornton of Thornton's gas stations and convenience stores, they purchased Old Latonia for $13.5 million and bought most of the property along what became Houston Road. He first developed the land on the eastern side of the expressway before focusing on the track itself. He convinced local government to construct a new road leading to the racetrack. That new road was named Turfway Road since it led to the racing turf, and therefore Carroll renamed Old Latonia Turfway Park. And there's a great shot of the renovated Turfway Park as well as one of its programs. During the 1986 meet, a virtually unknown horse won an insignificant race at Turfway. Alashiba then won the Kentucky Derby Horse of the Year honors and became the world's richest racehorse. True, this world-famous horse won its first race at Turfway Park. The new and improved Jim Beam Spiral Stakes offered prize money of $500,000, quite a jump from the $10,000 first race. Turfway Park set two betting records in 1987. Fans wagered over $2 million on the 12-race card, and the track also had its first $1 million day. New construction offered a new elevator system, upgraded general office, and a valet. A great color shot of Turfway Park. And a couple more. Turfway Park introduced the first pick 3 wagering. Carroll devised the first inter-track wagering in the country with his race book. Turfway televised live races to other tracks across the country, and soon those tracks were doing the same. This was likely the biggest innovation in all of horse racing, and it started at Turfway Park. Pete Rose. Well, it's no secret that Cincinnati Reds great Pete Rose was banned from baseball after he admitted to betting on sports, including wagers on his own team, but few know where his troubles really began. In 2016, after being inducted into the Cincinnati Reds Hall of Fame, he was asked about the exact pose he would like for his life-size statue to be placed outside Great American Ballpark. And he's quoted as saying, "Well, I sure as hell don't want it to be standing in the $2 window at Turfway Park," because that's where his troubles all began. 1990 Jim Beam Spiral Stakes. Steve Ford, son of former President Gerald Ford, was named Associate Vice President. With Carroll and the rest of the management team, they increased purses, thereby inviting better quality stock to the big race. The Spiral was beginning to look like a miniature Kentucky Derby. With veteran Pat Day aboard, Summer Squall won easily. He shipped to Keeneland for the Bluegrass Stakes and became the second horse from Latonia to spiral up through the prep races. It appeared the Turfway would finally produce a Kentucky Derby winner, but unbridled past Summer Squall at the finish line. Summer Squall would go on to win the Preakness as well that year. Great shot of Summer Squall and Hansel, who won the Jim Beam, finished 10th on the Derby, but won the Preakness in Belmont. So Hansel became the first Turfway Park horse to win 2 legs of the American Triple Crown. 1992 Spiral Stakes, only one race on of the Triple Crown remained. That was the Kentucky Derby. And I'll skip through part of this, but Pat Day was looking for his first win. He was 0 for 9 in the Derby aboard Little E.T. Day ran a magnificent race, but trailed the favorite near the finish line. But Little E.T. Rallied and became the first Turfway horse to ever win the coveted Kentucky Derby. And some great shots from after that race. After Little E.T.'s Kentucky Derby win, even more top quality thoroughbred shipped to Turfway for the prep race. It was raised to $600,000 for the 1993 event. Prairie Bayou won the Spiral and the Bluegrass Stakes, came in second in the Derby, but went on to win the Preakness. Prairie Bayou was the 4th straight Jim Beam winner to capture one of the American Classics. Polar Express was another great horse Spiral winner. And I'm going to read through a few of these. Turfway introduced the trifecta and superfecta wagering, still another Jerry Carroll innovation that was implemented nationwide and still is a standard in racing today. Serena's Song, a filly, won the 1995 Jim Beam, but failed in the Bluegrass and the Derby. Later wins in Pimlico, New York, Monmouth Park, and the Kentucky Cup still earned her the Eclipse Award. Along with Hansel and Prairie Bayou, she was the 3rd Beam champion to take the award in their respective categories. Harrah's Entertainment. By 1995, Jerry Carroll had spent nearly $30 million making Turfway Park a state-of-the-art facility, but gambling, boats, and casinos were starting to appear in the region. By 1997, some form of casino gambling was legal in 29 states. Carroll wanted Turfway Park to become the Las Vegas of the Midwest. He signed an agreement with Harrah's Entertainment with plans to convert Turfway into the entertainment casino horse racing megacenter. By 1998, however, Harrah's wanted out, believing the state officials would never legalize slot machine gambling. Revenues began to drop, and attendance started to drop as well. Jim Beam wanted out too, but they stayed on temporarily. Other than on Spiral Day, attendance continued to drop. The 1998 Jim Beam was nearly a disaster. More than 20,000 fans were expected when high winds with gusts above 60 miles an hour toppled the massive VIP tent. In addition, 3 power poles were snapped. the event was postponed until the following afternoon when repairs were made. VIPs that year included Milton Berle, Bo Derrick, and John Forsythe. High winds returned late in the day, however, pulling up tent stakes and sending porta potties sliding across the apron on their sides. By 1998, Carroll had had enough. Kentucky lawmakers were not going to budge. So many politicians promised to legalize casino gambling if elected, but they were all lies. Carroll and his associates purchased land in the middle of nowhere and opened the Kentucky Speedway. Kentucky Turfway Park was sold to a group including Keeneland, G-Tech, and Caesars Entertainment. G-Tech backed out in 2005, so it was mainly Caesars that owned the facility at that point in time. Bob Ellison took over as new general manager, a local horse owner and enthusiast. Jim Beam dropped out as the corporate sponsor, and Carroll was fortunate to sign Gallery Furniture on for a few years. Spiral Stakes events continued, but with a little bit less success. Turfway's premier event had no sponsor at all for 3 years. Purse money dropped from $600,000 to $500,000. There were some notable winners, though. Event of the year, Stephen Got Even, Global Eyes, and Balto Star were top winners in that era. Also, female jockeys, for whatever reason, had great success at Turfway Park. And just some of those, PJ Cooksey, most people wouldn't recognize that name for sure. Julie Crone as well. And other tragedies, unfortunately. In 2004, Michael Rowland was the leading jockey at his home track, Thistledown, near Cleveland. He raced at Turfway during their off-season. Rowland was only one victory away from reaching the 4,000 win mark, and his fellow jockeys and management at Turfway were well prepared for a huge celebration. In the third race aboard Distinctive Blues, he finished 9th, however. Rowland prepared for his next mount, the 7th race. Aboard the more competitive World Trade, Rowland was well in the lead, passing the 3-furlong pole. In an instant, however, the race would mimic the event at Old Latonia in 1915 involving jockey Carl Gans. World Trade suffered a fractured foreleg and collapsed, quickly throwing Rowland to the dirt. Other 1,500-pound thoroughbreds could not avoid the fallen jockey. EMTs were summoned, but could quickly see the severity of the injuries. Spectators stood in near silence. No more races were run that night, and racing was canceled the following night. 4 days later, having never regained consciousness, Michael Rowland was taken off life support. He passed away on February 9th with his wife and 15-year-old daughter at his bedside. He is survived by 2 other daughters. Mediocre success of the Spiral Stakes continued. By 2005, it had become a traditional springtime event. Lane's End stepped up as the corporate sponsor, and more legendary thoroughbreds were victors, including Hard Spun, Perfect Dripped, Flower Alley, Dean's Kitten. But it was still spiraling down. By 2009, the on-track handle was down an incredible 16%. Turfway eliminated 4 stakes races and cut the Kentucky Cup purse from $350,000 to $200,000. A bill to legalize casino gambling failed once again. Dollar beer and dollar hot dogs was introduced to try to gain attendance. Live bands were booked on Friday nights. On the 50th anniversary, going back to 1959, the building was literally falling apart. Animal Kingdom won the 2011 Vinery Spiral Stakes with a replacement jockey. Animal Kingdom won the Kentucky Derby, came the second in the Preakness, and finished out of the Money in the Belmont Stakes. Still, Animal Kingdom was the second Turfway Park horse to win the Kentucky Derby, and is thought to be the most impressive horse to ever run on the Florence, Kentucky Polytrack. There was a hint of optimism. The Kentucky Downs, located in the westernmost part of the state, installed historical racing machines, the first Kentucky track to do so. Similar to slot machines, each push of a button recalls the odds and winner of a previously run thoroughbred horse race. While actual slot machines were still illegal in the state, games based on pari-mutuel wagering were perfectly legal. Casino owners made no immediate plans to install HRMs at Turfway Park. New racing dates were added, and the Kentucky Cup Day of Champions was resurrected. Still, Turfway Park continued to spiral down with regard to overall attendance and purse money. Casino-style gambling in nearby Lawrenceburg, Indiana, and the newly opened Horseshoe Casino in downtown Cincinnati wreaked havoc on Turfway's business. Turfway's yearly spiral stakes kept them above water. On any typical Saturday night, 2 floors of the 5-story facility were closed off to patrons. On more than one occasion, a waterfall descended from above, cascading down the front stairs onto the first floor. Plastic bags covering numerous plumbing fixtures that were out of order. It was estimated that casino gaming would bring in $100 million, but in 2012, that was still just a dream. Turfway's owners, Caesars and later Rock Gaming and later still Hard Rock Casino, stopped Turfway from installing the HRMs. They saw that as direct competition to their already successful Cincinnati venue. So through each new owner promised millions in renovations and upgrades that never happened. More racing dates were canceled and more stakes races were canceled. If there was one highlight, it was jockey Perry Oots, one of racing's most dedicated riders. Perry mounted Tanner Me Boy in September of 2012. While not a prestigious race by any means, it became Perry's 6,000th victory. In 2012, Bob Elston was out and Chip Bach took over as the lead man. The biggest blow to Turfway came in October 2012 when the Kentucky Racing Commission revoked the September racing dates. The Courier-Journal reported that the white flag had been raised at Turfway Park. An elaborate plan was once again devised by the casino, but it never materialized. 2013, Turfway's premier event became the Horseshoe Casino Spiral Stakes. Dollar beer, dollar hot dogs continued as did special concerts, but Turfway was just barely surviving. For 50 years, the Northern Kentucky track had conducted a fall meet, but no more. Off-season housing of the horses was also canceled. MMA fighting events took place in the grandstands in an attempt to make more money. In 2015, the Kentucky Racing Commission voted to allow HRM statewide. However, Turfway's owners at that time, Rock Gaming, said no. With a name change at Horseshoe, Turfway's main event became the Jack Casino Spiral Stakes. The ruse, Jack owners finally devised a major renovation plan. A total makeover was drawn up, including new entrance, new restrooms, and most importantly, the installation of at least 200 HRM machines. Temporary walls were put up, hiding the construction from patrons and employees, but in reality, no renovations were ever going to be made by the casino management. There were highlights, however. Perry Oots mounted Need on March 3rd, 2018 for his 50,000th win. 63 years old at the time, he ranked 9th by the number of wins in the history of North American racing, and he was far from done. The best news came in 2018 when a new corporate sponsor was announced. Famed restaurateur Jeff Ruby came on board, and with a play on words, the big event was called the Jeff Ruby Stakes, STEAKS. But the end is near. Casino owners still refuse to spend any money to remodel the facility. In September 2019, Churchill Downs announced that they were going to fight for all of Turfway's racing dates as the track was on its last leg. In addition, they were going to build a new facility somewhere in northern Kentucky, eliminating the need for the Florence track altogether. In reality, Churchill was pulling a fast one on the downtown casino. Hard Rock knew that a new racetrack in northern Kentucky would put Turfway out of business for good. They would lose what investment they did have. Behind the scenes, however, something else was taking place. Turfway employees were called to a meeting, assuming the track was closing its doors for good. The surprise was that Churchill Downs had purchased Turfway Park. It was announced that the entire structure would be demolished and a new casino with 850 HRMs would be constructed. Here's some great pictures of the old Turfway Park just before demolition, which happened right at the event of COVID-19. Racing continued while demolition plans were made. With only a couple of weeks before the end of the 2020 season and the running of Jeff Ruby Stakes, COVID-19 hit. Patrons were not permitted to attend the races, but the races went off as planned anyway. As demolition began, longtime employees set up chairs in the parking lot. Many tears were shed, but most knew that better times were on their way. There could not have been a better plan for the old place than Churchill Downs coming to the rescue. Here's some shots of during demolition. But first things first, Churchill executives, along with Chip Bach and others, knew it would be late 2022 before the new facility was open. They wanted racing to continue even though there was no building. Construction began first on replacing the old polytrack with a new synthetic surface called tapeta. The company also needed quick revenue, so they leased 47,000 square foot property in the old Latonia Shopping Center, and Newport Racing and Gaming opened in 2020 with about 300 HRMs. There's a couple of shots of the interior there. Churchill brought Michael Taylor in as the new president to oversee operations. Chip Bach remains as the general manager. March 19, 2021, Churchill hosted a groundbreaking ceremony for the $145 million renovation project. The 2021 Jeff Ruby Stakes ran without spectators. Churchill announced that at least $26 million more would be spent to upgrade the backside with new dormitories, 5 new barns, new infrastructure, and more. Opening day at the new Turfway Park Racing and Gaming was scheduled for September 1st, 2022, still months away. The 2022 Jeff Ruby Stakes went off again without a public audience. The event proved to be the best to date regarding the quality of the horses. For the first time, 3 thoroughbreds who raced on the minor league track in Florence made it to the same big dance, the Kentucky Derby. Tis the Bomb was in 6th place as the field entered the far turn. Tawny Port was a neck ahead. Rich Strike was dead last, but was able to finish in 3rd place. This is at the Jeff Ruby Stakes. The 3rd place finish in the Spiral gave Rich Strike enough points to qualify as an also eligible for the Kentucky Derby. It was not until a third World Road was scratched at the last minute that Rich Strike could compete. In the Kentucky Derby, Rich Strike left the gate at 80-1 odds. Rich Strike's rider, Sonny Leon, made his move down the home stretch to win by only 3/4 of 1 length. All 3 Turfway entries, Tis the Bomb, Tawny Port, and Rich Strike rode in the same way for the run for the Roses. Tis Bomb came in 9th, Tawny Port finished in 7th place, and Rich Strike became the 3rd Turfway Park thoroughbred to spiral up and win the Kentucky Derby. Turfway Park held its soft opening for family and friends on August 31st, 2022. Attendance for opening day, September 1st, was packed. Many employees who had worked at the old Turfway were first in line to work at the new facility. Upgrades to the paddock, winter circle, and apron were also made, allowing patrons close-up views of all the races. And some shots of the new Turfway Park Racing and Gaming. Not a real clear shot of the event center, but it's a beautiful place. That's the original program for the opening season. And a great shot of the horses making the first turn. Sports betting in Turfway Park's future? Well, in the old days, advertising was virtually non-existent. Now, radio and television ads are constant. The Players Club brings in repeat patrons for special giveaways and contests. Kentucky finally approved sports betting in mid-2023, allowing patrons to bet on football, basketball, baseball, and a dozen other sports. Year-round training was brought back to Turfway. Today, more than 1,000 thoroughbreds can be housed and trained at Turfway Park year-round. The incredible event center can be rented out for weddings, business meetings, and more. Several concerts have already been hosted there, including Joan Jett, Martina McBride, and Tanya Tucker. 2 Phils won the 2023 Jeff Ruby Stakes in front of a live audience for the first time in several years. Horse racing, especially in Kentucky, is all about tradition. In this new, beautiful facility, that tradition has been reborn. The book that Dr. James C. Claypool and myself put together, 6x9 perfect bound, nearly 300 pages, color interior, more than 200 images with appendix and index. The foreword is written by Hall of Fame jockey Steve Cawthon, and you can see my website there. Very easy to remember. It's bobtheauthor.com. And for a limited time, I am offering free shipping for this book. And the closing chapter includes short biographies of some of the most significant owners and jockeys that raced at Latonia and Turfway Park. And I won't go through all of those. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you so much.
All right, well, thank you, Bob. I guess we'll get started with the trivia questions. And just to remind everybody, that question was, what was the name of the horse that raced at Old Latonia, who was the only horse to ever beat the famous Man of War? We had correct answers from multiple people within like a minute. It was crazy. But that
I,
answer was
I
up.
didn't make a tough enough question.
And the first person to get it was Alex Welpenheim. So congratulations, Alex. You'll be getting your prize in the mail. I know you talked about that in your presentation. I don't know if there was anything else you wanted to talk about regarding that question at all.
No, not really. It's just a paragraph or so that's included in the book, since Man of War didn't race here. But I just find it funny that the horse's name was Upset, to be able to upset the famous horse.
Yes. We don't have any questions yet, but we do have a few comments. Somebody said that Bob Elliston went on to be the vice president of sales for Keeneland.
Correct.
So that's interesting. Somebody said that they heard the horse racing seating at the new park is not very good. So I don't know. I've never been, but
Well, the facility, it's still growing. There's a lot of people upset that they don't have the grandstands that the old place had. But quite honestly, those grandstands were only filled a couple of times a year just for the big race. So it was difficult for them to spend that kind of money on a facility that would not be full. They're also mimicking similar tracks that have been built across the country these days. But we do have some portable grandstands in the event center now, so it makes it a little bit easier to watch the races.
and we do have lots of people thanking you and saying it was a great, well done presentation. But if anybody has a question, please get those in the chat so we can discuss them. We
Thank
do.
you for those comments.
Somebody just said that their great uncle was a jockey who rode regularly at Latonia, and he went on to ride Captain Hal to a second place finish in 1925.
Awesome. Yeah, there's so much more in the book that could be talked about. It covers a long a long history. So there's other little tidbits that we just didn't have time to mention.
Yeah.
Mac Garner is a great Covington jockey that had a great success here locally.
In the meantime, while people are getting questions in, would you like to discuss what made you interested in this topic at all?
Well, as you know, I love local history. This is book number 6 or 7. I can't remember now. I've worked at the Old Latonia, or Old Turfway rather. Started there in security, and when they built the new place, and actually Chip Bach, the general manager, said, Bob, probably jokingly, Bob, your next book needs to be on this place. And I started thinking, well, Dr. Claypool had put a nice history book together covering Old Latonia and the opening of New Latonia, but the history really stopped there. So I said, well, maybe it is time to do another book that kind of shares both the history that he put together as well as the new history that is being made there.
So somebody did just ask if you will be presenting on Northern Kentucky History Day.
I will be for Northern Kentucky Regional History Day. I'm very honored to be named the keynote speaker there again this year. And I will do this presentation.
Nice. So everybody go check that out.
Absolutely.
But I guess if there are no questions, we can go ahead and wrap up just a couple minutes early. I will go ahead. Oh, somebody did just ask if Steve Cawthon have experiences at Turfway.
He did, and he mentions some of that in his foreword that he wrote for the book. He was kind enough to put that together for us. And I'm honored to have a Hall of Fame jockey write the foreword for the book. But he's still local, still very heavily involved with the horse racing trade.
Nice. Okay, so I guess we will go ahead and wrap up then.
Well, thank you so much for having me again.
All right, so as a reminder to everyone, the museum is temporarily closed for minor repairs and renovations, but there are still outreach programs available during this time. For volunteer opportunities, you can contact info@bcm.org, and we will reopen February 27th. And Race to Fame Hometown Kentucky Derby Legends opens on March 26th, showcasing notable Northern Kentuckians in the Kentucky Derby, such as Steve Cawthon and Eddie Arcaro. So please stay tuned for more information on that. And the museum is now hiring for a visitor services associate. Working under the guidance of the visitor services coordinator, the visitor services associate provides frontline visitor support, customer service, and sales assistance to visitors, the public, and to the BCM store customers. So you can visit bcmuseum.org for the full job description and instructions on how to apply. And be sure to save the date for BCM's 2 upcoming summer camps: Mini Explorer B Camp for ages 4 to 6, June 11th, 12th, and 13th, and Under the Sea Adventure Camp for children entering 2nd through 5th grade on June 25th, 26th, 27th, and 28th. You can visit #SummerCamp, learn more, and secure your spot now at bcmuseum.org. Plus, our friends at NKU Scripps Howard Center for Civic Engagement have an upcoming 6 at 6 lecture called Mind Over Matter, Brain-Controlled Systems on Wednesday, March 13th at 6 p.m. This is all about a project that aims to create a bionic arm for individuals with limb amputations, and this lecture will be held both in person at the St. Elizabeth Healthcare Training Center in Erlanger and virtually with Zoom, and you can register at www.6at6.nku.edu. Finally, our next Northern Kentucky History Hour will be on March 5th, Northern Kentucky Movie Theaters with Don Weber. Please be sure to tune in for that. And for more Northern Kentucky History Hour through the week, check out our Facebook page and our YouTube channel, where you can find the latest Curators Chat along with all of our past Northern Kentucky History Hour presentations. So please like and subscribe. And that's all we have time for tonight this evening. Thank you all again to our sponsors and the supporters of BCM. And until then, take care, everyone, and good night.